the excessive burden of the cost of housing on New Zealand families.
Question number 2, the Leader of the Opposition, David Shearer.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by his statement that $360 million is a possible number for the cost of the loyalty scheme of asset sales?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I stand by my full statement, which was I don't know the details because they're not agreed yet and what the loyalty bonus might look like, but yeah, that's a possible number. But I haven't seen their workings, so I wouldn't want to agree with that at this point. Now, having had a chance to look at it, I understand the $360 million number came from Russell Norman and that there were gross errors in the way it was calculated. Officials are working through the details of the loyalty bonus for Mighty River, but even if there was a loyalty bonus across the entire program, the cost wouldn't be anywhere near $360 million, let alone the $500 million reported in the Herald today.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Given that yesterday he talked about a figure of less than half of $1.3 billion, he thought that the $360 million was a possible number, and today he's indicating $60 to $80 million. What is the actual figure, and will it change tomorrow?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the final number at this stage is not known. The final number is not known. I didn't agree with the $360 million yesterday. I said it's possible depending on how it was calculated and by who. But frankly, what we've seen in this debate is that Labor and the Greens just make up all sorts of numbers. According to Labor, selling shares to New Zealanders is a Ponzi scheme. Well, I don't know, but there are certain things that are a Ponzi scheme, but selling shares to New Zealanders aren't one of them.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did the Prime Minister announce the loyalty scheme to the National Party conference on Sunday without actually being aware of the cost of it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, what I indicated to New Zealanders on Sunday is that there were a number of elements of the mixed ownership model that we were able to get out there and confirm. One is that the minimum parcel would be $1,000. The second thing is that there would be an unscaled amount of $2,000 for direct investment, that there would be a loyalty bonus that applied. And, Mr Speaker, had I known that there were only going to be 79 protesters outside, I would have gone and had a chat to them as well, but I was expecting tens of thousands, the way the Greens and Labor were talking about it.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, that was a straight, direct question about whether the Prime Minister's announcement was costed.
Well, if that was the question, it's a shame that wasn't what was asked. If the member had asked, was the Prime Minister's statement costed, that would have been an interesting question, but that's not what the question... Well, order, but the question wasn't, as the member indicated, and also if questions are to be taken seriously, the level of objection has to come down, because the Minister is able, the Prime Minister in this case, is able to latch onto interjections and respond. If questions are to be serious, then the House has to listen to the answer. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did he announce the loyalty scheme to the National Party conference without being aware of the cost?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I announced the intention to have a loyalty scheme. I don't know the exact cost at this point, but what I do know is there may be no cost, because I was taking this morning to listen to Morning Report. And actually on Morning Report this morning, if I can quote from a stockbroker heavily involved in the Queensland rail float which had the loyalty bonus, he said, actually the amount the government receives for its 49% may actually increase, that the incentive increase for the float from locals and paid by itself is driving up the price to institutions they may pay.
Order, I think, given the question asked, the Prime Minister has given sufficient answer. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What proportion of shares will have to be set aside for the loyalty bonus, the settlements with iwi, to pay brokerage fees, advertising and public relation fees?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, in terms of the first point, it'll be the amount of the calculation done by those New Zealanders who buy direct shares up to their $2,000 limit applied by the loyalty number yet to be set. That will be calculable. In terms of the others, what the government is doing is releasing capital under the mixed ownership model to buy other assets. We've never argued that we're getting the absolute maximum price. If we wanted to do that, we would have followed Labor's model of flogging the lot off to foreigners.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koe. Mō tō karaki tēnei rā. To the Prime Minister, does the Prime Minister believe it to be fair, just and moral to be giving away hundreds of millions of dollars to investors for asset sales when the redress to Māori for 135 years or so of treaty breaches is capped at $1 billion, and how can he justify this?
The Right Honourable Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
firstly, we'd reject the first proposition of giving anything away. As I said, if you look at some of the financial advisors this morning, the argument is in fact actually the government's return could increase, not decrease. Secondly, I just utterly strongly reject actually the notion that the treaty breaches will be capped at $1 billion. It's a 1995 number. As the member knows, there's the relativity clause and others, and I'd strongly suggest the number at the end will be considerably greater than that.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the money to pay for the Shearer loyalty scheme be coming from debt or from reduced funding available to schools and hospitals?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the net proceeds from the mixed ownership model will be used to buy other assets for the development of New Zealand. So under a national government, $1 billion will be put into 21st century schools, and under Labor, nothing will be put in. Under national, $1 billion will be put into 21st century schools without debt.
Order.
Under Labor.
Order. I'm not sure that the answer is interesting, but I'm not sure it's actually an answer to the question asked. The question asked whether the cost of the scheme would be picked up through extra debt or reduction in spending on health and education, from memory, whereas the Prime Minister's answer talked about what the government planned to spend money on, and I'm not sure. So I bring the Prime Minister back to the question asked and ask him if he could focus on that. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, there's a net proceeds number, and that net proceeds will go into schools.
Question number 3, Barbara Stewart.